Welcome back to Bad Things in History, where our mission to explore the horrible history of each state continues. This time we turn our attention to California. The so-called Golden State has had so much death and suffering that we can barely scratch the surface today. And yet it is still an impressive collection of humanity's numerous failures. Let's begin with one of the worst floods in United States history. Great Flood of 1862. Native Americans in California told stories about the distant past to settlers that arrived in their lands. These ancient tales explained that the area around Sacramento could flood. At times, it even turned into an inland sea until the waters eventually found their way to the ocean. Nobody except the natives believed that this could really happen, but one very wet winter proved that the stories were true. Starting around 1842, the state of California suffered a severe drought. For the next 20 years, water became increasingly scarce, but conditions changed suddenly and without warning. It began snowing in Northern California in November 1861. In December, it became unusually warm and the snow started to melt. Then it started to rain. From December 23, 1861 until January 22, 1862, at least 30 inches of rain fell throughout the state. One man in Northern California described what happened during the floods. The water in the river seemed like some mighty uncontrollable monster of destruction broken away from its bonds, rushing uncontrollably on and everywhere carrying ruin and destruction in its course. From the head settlement to the mouth of the Trinity River, for a distance of 150 miles, everything was swept to destruction. Not a bridge was left, or a mining wheel, or a sluice box. Parts of ranches and miners' cabins met the same fate. The labor of hundreds of men and their savings of years invested in bridges, mines, and ranches were all swept away in 48 hours. An area of 300 miles within the Sacramento Valley was covered in water. It was such an impressive obstacle that on January 10, 1862, the recently elected governor of California, Leland Stanford, had to take a rowboat to his inauguration. The excessive rain also affected the Los Angeles area. And in addition to California, the floods caused extensive damage in surrounding states. Geologists have since discovered that massive floods occur in California roughly every 200 years. The next one is expected to kill up to 395,000 people and could cause nearly $1 trillion in damage. Emperor Norton. The state of California was once home to a man that declared himself Emperor of the United States. Joshua Abraham Norton was born in Kent, England on February 4, 1818. He spent most of his early years in South Africa but eventually moved to the United States. Joshua arrived in Boston in 1845. Nobody knows what he did for the next several years, but he surfaced again in 1849 after moving to San Francisco. After arriving in the city, Joshua Norton made a very good living. He invested in commodities and made a profit by real estate speculation. By most accounts, he was among the wealthiest men in the city. In December 1852, Joshua saw a rare business opportunity. China was experiencing famine and banned the export of rice. This increased the price of the crop elsewhere, so Joshua decided to purchase an entire 200,000-pound shipment of rice. By cornering the market, everyone would have to pay him for access to the valuable food product. Unfortunately, other ships with rice arrived from South America. The price plummeted and eventually drove Joshua into bankruptcy. By 1856, he was living in poverty and slept in a boarding house. The lack of income did not affect Joshua's ability to believe in himself. A few years after becoming destitute, he decided that the United States political system needed to be fixed. So Joshua declared himself Emperor of the country. He provided the following explanation on September 17, 1859. At the peremptory request and desire of a large majority of the citizens of these United States, I, Joshua Norton, formerly of Algoa Bay, Cape of Good Hope, and now for the last 9 years and 10 months past of San Francisco, California, declare and proclaim myself Emperor of these United States. And in virtue of the authority thereby in me vested, do hereby order and direct the representatives of the different states of the Union to assemble in a musical hall of this city on the first day of February next, then and there to make such alterations in the existing laws of the Union as may ameliorate the evils under which the country is laboring and thereby cause confidence to exist, both at home and abroad, in our stability and integrity. Over the next several years, Joshua would use his royal powers to issue several decrees. He requested that Congress should meet with him, which they failed to do. He then issued another decree ordering the U.S. Army to arrest members of Congress. The orders were not followed. In some cases, Joshua made decrees which left future generations with the impression that he might have been a visionary. He called for the creation of a League of Nations around 1875. It would be 40 years before the United States would take the idea seriously. He also advocated for the creation of a suspension bridge between San Francisco and Oakland. This was finally constructed in 1936. Joshua Norton spent most of his days walking around the city inspecting libraries and parks. He also wore an old army uniform, which was adorned with custom decorations. Additionally, Emperor Joshua printed his own money, which some local restaurants accepted. Today, the emperor's currency is even a valuable collector's item. In 1867, a San Francisco police officer arrested Joshua and had him sent to a mental institution for treatment. The locals became angry, and authorities were soon forced to release him. After being released, Joshua issued a pardon for the officer that arrested him. Police officers then began saluting Joshua whenever they encountered him. On January 8, 1880, Emperor Norton collapsed on a street corner. A nearby police officer asked for an ambulance. Before it could arrive, the emperor was dead. It was soon discovered that he was completely broke. Since there was nothing left to pay for a burial, Joshua was going to be provided with the same type of funeral arrangements as any other poor person who died in the city. However, local business leaders decided to contribute to the funeral fund. He was given a large funeral that was attended by over 10,000 people. Emperor Norton's story influenced the works of writers such as Mark Twain and Robert Louis Stevenson. He also had a stepdaughter, Isabel Osborne, who wrote of him after his death. He was a gentle and kindly man and fortunately found himself in the friendliest and most sentimental city in the world. The idea being, let him be emperor if he wants to. San Francisco played the game with him. San Francisco Plague. In addition to natural disasters, California was also ground zero for the bubonic plague. The plague began spreading through China in 1855. By 1894, it had arrived in Hong Kong. A few years later, in 1899, the disease began ravaging the city of Honolulu. As the plague spread throughout Hawaii, ships from the islands began arriving in San Francisco. Many of these vessels contained people who were infected with bubonic plague. Joseph J. Kenyon was the chief medical officer for the region. He ordered that any incoming ships should be quarantined to stop the plague from spreading. Many of the city leaders in San Francisco disagreed with Joseph. They claimed that the city didn't have to worry about bubonic plague. Asians had weakened immune systems from eating so much rice. Americans didn't have to worry because they had more robust immune systems, which wouldn't succumb to the disease so easily. At the time, nobody knew that fleas could spread the disease. Rodents escaped from quarantined ships and began spreading their fleas and the plague throughout the city. The Chinese section of San Francisco was very densely populated, which contributed to spreading the disease quickly. By March 11th, Joseph Kenyon's lab proved that plague was indeed spreading from the arriving ships. Additionally, several victims were already dead, but political leaders refused to acknowledge the danger as they didn't want to impact trade. California Governor Henry Gage publicly denied that bubonic plague existed in the state. Newspapers also began attacking Joseph Kenyon. The U.S. Treasury Secretary Lyman J. Gage decided to get involved. He created a 3-person commission to investigate what was happening. The commission determined that Joseph was correct. Bubonic plague was spreading throughout San Francisco. Governor Henry Gage then questioned the validity of the commissioner's findings and stopped cooperating with federal authorities. As the feud between Henry Gage and Lyman Gage intensified, Lyman Gage ordered Joseph Kenyon to place San Francisco's Chinatown under quarantine. He then ordered Joseph to force the residents of Chinatown to take an experimental vaccine, but the vaccine wasn't very well tested and had very unpleasant side effects. Understandably, the Chinese residents of San Francisco refused to submit. A federal court intervened and ruled that California did not have the right to force Chinese residents to take an experimental vaccine. Henry Gage continued to publicly spar with federal authorities about the plague. He insisted that either the disease wasn't a problem, or if it was, then the federal government must be responsible for introducing bubonic plague to California. In 1902, Henry Gage tried to seek re-election as governor. However, neighboring states were starting to quarantine traffic in goods from California to prevent bubonic plague from spreading. The state Republican Party decided that Henry Gage was an economic liability and chose another candidate for the position. The plague epidemic wasn't stopped until 1904. There were 121 cases identified. At least 119 of the victims died from the disease. 1906 San Francisco earthquake. After plague failed to destroy the city of San Francisco, nature decided to try a different approach. At 5:12 a.m. on April 18, 1906, the ground in Northern California began shaking violently. The resulting earthquake was felt most strongly in San Francisco, but tremors were noticed as far away as Oregon. The earthquake was so strong that some of the sediment around San Francisco briefly began behaving as a liquid. This allowed buildings to collapse, which then started fires. Unfortunately, pipes around the city were also crushed, which meant fires couldn't be extinguished. Firefighters tried to stop the flames from spreading by using dynamite to blow up buildings. Instead of having the desired effect, in many cases the explosions caused fire to spread even further. In the immediate aftermath of the earthquake, it was estimated that around 500 people died. However, it was later determined that the casualties in Chinatown were completely ignored. Including those victims, the final death toll was over 3,000. The city of San Francisco had a population of 401,000 before the earthquake. After the disaster, nearly 300,000 of them were homeless. Parks throughout the city became homeless camps for the next 2 years. The California government was very concerned that San Francisco might suffer economically because of the disaster. The state's governor, George Pardee, said of the earthquake, "This is not the first time that San Francisco has been destroyed by fire. I have not the slightest doubt that the city by the Golden Gate will be speedily rebuilt and will, almost before we know it, resume her former great activity." Efforts to rebuild the city were completed in 1915. While construction efforts were taking place, Los Angeles began receiving much of the shipping traffic, which used to go through San Francisco. Interstate dust storm. California is a very large state. Most people who travel between the northern and southern parts have to use Interstate 5. This highway carries travelers through the low-lying farmlands that occupy much of California. Traffic moving along the road increased during the Thanksgiving holiday of 1991, but the farmers of California were not feeling very thankful that year. They had endured several years of drought, which was proving to be very costly. On November 29, 1991, it was another busy day on Interstate 5. An unusually strong wind began blowing through the valley that afternoon. The dry soil couldn't resist the turbulent air and was dispersed throughout the atmosphere. By 2:30 p.m., visibility was very low. Most of the travelers on the highway could only see a few feet in front of them. Among those driving down the highway that day was a young family of 4. A 31-year-old teacher, her husband, and their 2 young children were moving south along the interstate. They could not see that in front of them, several vehicles had already collided. Most importantly, there was a large tractor-trailer stopped in the middle of the road. The family of 4 plowed into the rear of the truck and their vehicle burst into flames. The mother tried to save her family from burning to death, but couldn't intervene before the fire killed them. Unfortunately, her story was just one of many tragedies which happened that day. There were 349 people involved in vehicle collisions. Of those, 151 were seriously injured and 17 died. There were 164 vehicles involved in the crash. The entire deadly event unfolded over the course of just 6 minutes. This is still the largest multiple vehicle accident in United States history. What do you think about the state of California? Did we miss anything important? And why do so many bad things happen in San Francisco? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Did you learn something interesting from this episode? If so, then do us a favor and hit that like button. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We make episodes almost every week. And if you see enough of them, you will have the knowledge required to ensure everyone around you can be as depressed as you are. Thank you for watching Bad Things in History.